how I began looking deeper and started reporting the story. And once I started seeing cracks in what was the official narrative in Helter Skelter that had been written by the prosecutor, Vince Bugliosi, everything kind of unraveled. And I followed leads that took me sometimes to great places and sometimes to blind alleys and dead ends. And one after another, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, you start off the book with an interview with Vincent Bugliosi, and you stated that that's the most popular true crime book ever. So he was able to not only influence the juries, but also the public with his version of events. And I do commend you for going out and really researching so many people that he or were involved in those cases, involved in his book and involved in the
use it. So that little thread that he gave me kind of was the first unraveling of his own narrative. I don't think that's what he intended. Once I found that out, which meant that he also had to misrepresent some of the information in the book, I found beyond that much more important stuff, that raised questions about the entire prosecution, the motive for the murders, quite a bit of stuff.
Right, and so after Bugliosi, you kind of reached out and you had, and it's important to remember when we talk about this book that the Manson family was not arrested for 4 months after the killings. So there was a maximum amount of fear and terror happening in Los Angeles, and the stories were very lurid. But you talked to like Terry Melcher, who was close to, well, he denied he was close, but who was Terry Melcher and why is he important to the Manson story?
Well, historically, he was a son of Doris Day, in the 1950s, the number one female movie actress in the world, a singer-actress. And he was a record producer in and of his own right. He was actually very talented, and he was kind of a boy wonder. So in his early 20s, he was producing The Byrds, Paul Revere and the Raiders, the Mamas and the Papas, and he was very close to the Beach Boys. He lived at the house where eventually Sharon Tate and 4 other people were murdered on August 8th. He had moved out prior to the murders, but he had met Manson in 1968 when Manson was living at his friend Dennis Wilson, the drummer for the Beach Boys' house. And then when Manson decided in the official narrative to ignite a race war he called Helter Skelter by blaming horrific murders on the Black Panthers, he sent Linda Kasabian, Patricia Krenwinkel, Susan Atkins, and Tex Watson to the former home of Terry Melcher with instructions to horrifically kill whoever they encountered, to instill fear in Terry Melcher. So Melcher provided the prosecution with a reason for why that house was selected, and it's still a kind of convoluted reason how, if you're going to scare Terry Melcher, how is he even supposed to know this? Right. Unless he's informed that these murders were intended to scare him. What I found after about a year of reporting was that the story about Melcher and Manson's relationship was a lie, that Melcher knew Manson much better, had a much more extensive relationship with him that included and went beyond the murder period, that Melcher had visited the Spahn Ranch and the Barker Ranch to see Manson twice in September, late August and September after the murders. So that kind of undermined the whole motive if we couldn't trust the main witness that gave the prosecution the reason for the house being selected. That was one of the first big findings.
Right, so there were 3 meetings between Melcher and Manson.
So he told what were essentially lies about the last times he had seen Manson, how well he knew him, how many times he'd met him. And I had first been told this alternative version by Rudy Altobelli, who had owned the house where the murders happened and was away. He lived in the guest house. And Rudy was also a principal witness for the prosecution. And once I gained his trust, and he was another one who had never been interviewed at all, he started telling me the truth about Melcher and the Manson family, stuff that he had kept to himself for years. And once I had that, I was calling Terry Melcher trying to get an interview with him, and I'd hinted a little bit what I knew. And at one point he called Rudy, because they were still friends, and he told Rudy he wanted to know how I knew all this stuff. And according to Rudy, he said Vince was supposed to have taken care of all this. It was never supposed to have come out. Subsequently, I actually found documents in Vince Bugliosi's own hand of interviews with other prosecution witnesses who described seeing Melcher at the ranch after the murders, both the Spahn and the Barker ranches. He denied everything that I put in front of him, and then threatened, to sue me and throw my briefcase off his roof, and then in the same breath offered me the option of writing his official biography with him, his memoirs. And he said he could tell me stories about his mother and the Rat Pack and Elvis that had never been told before, and I could do that if I didn't do this book about him and the Manson family. He was basically trying to bribe me not to do it. So there's a lot of that in the book. That was not an isolated incident.
Right, and you were constantly getting threatened with lawsuits and even death threats as well, like you should stay away.
Let's move on to tonight's special guest. With us in Los Angeles, Vincent Bugliosi, who will be forever known as the man who prosecuted and put Charles Manson behind bars. During Mr. Bugliosi's 8-year career in the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office, Vince was successful in 105 out of 106 felony jury trials that included winning 21 consecutive murder cases for the prosecution. He later wrote Helter, Skelter about the Manson murders. It is still the best-selling true crime book in publishing history since the Simpson verdict last week. Vince has turned down literally dozens of requests to appear on other programs, so I'm especially pleased to welcome here tonight. Vince, I want to get right to it. This is our mandatory short segment, so I may be interrupting your first response. Obviously, what I want to know is your visceral reaction to the Simpson verdict.
Well, Geraldo, I'm almost too disgusted to talk about it. In my opinion, there's absolutely no question whatsoever of this man's guilt, but yet he's able to walk out of court a free man with a smile on his face. He'll probably be playing golf or tennis in a couple days while his two murder victims are decomposing in their graves. I think it's a terrible, terrible miscarriage of justice here, one of the darkest days ever for American justice. And Simpson now has the audacity to act like he was the one that was being put out. He's putting pressure on the LAPD to find the true killer. I'll say this about Simpson. He's elevating audacity to symphonic and operatic levels. As I've told you before, Geraldo, in all my years, other than cases where the killer is apprehended during the perpetration of a homicide, I've never seen a more obvious case of guilt. If Simpson is innocent, Geraldo, then these two people are still alive. When you find someone's blood, when someone's blood is at the murder scene, that's really the end of the ball game. There's nothing more to say. And here, not only was Simpson's blood found at the murder scene, but the victim's blood was found inside his car and home. And under these circumstances, there's just no possible way for him to be innocent. Not in the world in which we live, only in a fantasy world. Yet this jury, Geraldo, apparently gave no weight to the tremendous amount of incriminating evidence and bought into this preposterous defense argument that Simpson was being framed by the LAPD because he was black, the so-called race card issue. There was no frame up here, and there was no real racial... Glamorous Hollywood, home of adventure and romance. Memories are born here in Hollywood, fascinating make-believe day.
That's why they framed O.J. Simpson, and that's why every single moment of every day, that's all you see on every single channel on TV, that's all you hear on radio everywhere across this country.
Pull that wide open.
Is O.J. Simpson.
Do you know that Clinton played golf with O.J. Simpson 3 months ago?
Yes, I did.
Do you know that that O.J. had a cocaine habit and ran in many of the same circles as our cocaine dealer?
Yes, I did. I also know that he was framed. O.J. Simpson didn't kill anybody that night, but...
Have you noticed what the SOC units wear? They wear black ski masks.
Mm-hmm.
And they carry military-style knives.
Mm-hmm. And there just happens to be a policeman there who thinks that somebody might be in trouble in that house.
And just happens to be a bodyguard that works for L.A. police.
Yeah, and Vince Foster's murder, nobody's asking about that anymore. Nobody's listening to anything about Whitewater anymore. Nobody cares if we invade Korea or Haiti anymore. The only thing that the American sheep will care about is if O.J. Simpson is or is not guilty.
And I think it's a pretty foregone conclusion that when he wrote those letters saying, leave my kids out of it, he was certain that the same fate would befall his kids as had happened to his ex-wife.
Mm-hmm.
If he didn't toe the line, and that's what he's doing because he's got enough guts to do that. And God help him because he's been set up. I'm as sure of it as I'm sitting here.
Absolutely.
And I think we should reveal who it is because I've been revealing a lot of stuff about CIA and the different people connected with this mafia of federal agents that run drugs in this country, and that's what we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
That crowd. I got a letter from one of the SOC units today that identified the murderer of Karen Silkwood as Keir McGee. And I think we can find the murderer of O.J. Simpson's wife if we look hard enough.
Well, I think that it's not going to be that hard if people will turn their attention away from all the bullshit and start doing what they should be doing and using their brains.
I've been in this town so long that back in the city I've been taken for lost and gone and unknown for a long, long time. Fell in love
The motive of the Manson family was to attain political power in the United States. They wanted to start a race war between blacks and whites.
Deputy District Attorney Stephen Kay helped put the Manson family behind bars. Now he's fighting to keep them in jail because he says they're a threat to society.
Manson, the family, would at least rule the United
parole
States.
board.
It was never clear
She now says she lied during her trial because of Charlie Manson's hold on her.
Did you or did you not kill Sharon Tate?
No, I did not.
I thought you told me earlier, though, that why you felt so bad is that
I was
you're
involved.
craving forgiveness for what you did.
I was involved. I was there. I participated. It's the same thing as actually taking a life in by law. Maybe I could have stopped it. I didn't.
So the mass murderess now says she didn't murder at all. Manson gave the orders, and the other man in the pack, Charles Tex Watson, did the killings.
Why couldn't you speak up during the trial and say, I was there, I was part of it, but I didn't kill?
The women in the Manson family, at that point in time, were expected to back the men.